What's going on, guys? Welcome back to another episode of the Paintball Roundtable. I, as always, am your host, Alex. I have here with me, apparently, my seemingly regular guest, Alex Lescart.
How's it going, guys?
And we have a new guest here with us today, Mr. Joe Tingley.
How you all doing?
And today we're going to be covering something that a big recent news break, all the rule changes in the PSP. And certainly from what I've seen all over Facebook and the PB Nations and the rest of the internets, it's pretty controversial as far as I can tell. And there's some pretty significant rule changes that I think are going to severely affect how the game is viewed as a spectator, how the game is played as a player, and how the game is even coached as a coach. So let's just go ahead and get started and jump right into it. We'll talk about some rule changes, and then we'll kind of talk about maybe our personal experiences within the PSP and some other PSP like affiliate stuff, and how we think is really going to affect us as players and spectators. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started with those rule changes. What do you wanna start with?
We'll start with the semi-auto only.
Semi-auto only. So if you have not seen the news announcement, which I doubt anyone's not seen at this point, but basically what's going on is within the Pro division, which is the Challengers and the Champions division. Basically, what's going on is they are switching to semi-auto only instead of the PSP ramping. Now, across the board, throughout the entire PSP, the rate of fire cap has been dropped to 10.2 balls per second. And the semi-auto only is only for the Pro Challengers and Champions, whereas the rest of the PSP is still going to be doing PSP ramping, but just capped at that 10.2. How just right off the bat, just general thoughts. How does that going to change the game itself? Player wise, spectator wise. I don't know. Go for it.
Yeah, I'll let Joe go first because you play the PSP.
Sure. I think that it definitely changes the way movement occurs. You're talking about a lot less pain on a break, so you're much more likely to be able to make it to your initial bunkers. Now you have a lot more opportunity to shoot paint. So most of the guys that I know that have played both at the 10.2 or 10.5, I think it was a couple years ago,
Yep.
and have played at the 12.5, both say everybody says you're going to end up shooting a lot more paint. The argument often seems counterintuitive,
Yeah.
but because you have more of an opportunity to get to your bunker and shoot, you're much more likely to actually be shooting more paint, not less.
I never thought of that.
I agree with that. I remember when the young and beautiful Miss Keely Watson took over the PSP and dropped the fire rate. I think she's the one who dropped it to 12.5, I believe. And everybody thought that the game was just going to become incredibly slow and nobody was going to shoot any paint. And I actually remember a lot of the paint companies. I remember Key and Valken and who else was doing paint way back when? Somebody else was doing paint. I remember some backlash from the industry itself being like, the pros aren't going to shoot in as much paint. We're not going to make as much money because the fire rate's slower. As it turned out, I don't think anybody, I'm sure somebody thought of it at some point. As it turned out, because of the slower fire rate, granted, not saying the pros are bad, but just because of that slower fire rate, people are able to break through those lanes easier and they don't get shot as often. You don't lose bodies off the break like you do with a higher rate of fire and stuff like that. Those pros, like you said, end up shooting more paint because they have, it. I don't really know how to phrase it, but it's almost like they have more trouble actually trying to hit somebody because of that slower fire rate.
Absolutely. I think if you compare the videos from 13 to 14, at any of the tournaments, on average, you're going to see one guy dropping off the break when the pros were shooting 12.5 ramping. On average, it was more often that guys were actually making it to their initial bunkers 5 live.
Yeah.
And just right there, every guy carrying 7, 8, 9 pods on his back has, even 15 seconds in, you're probably talking 2 pods gone at least.
Right.
As opposed to maybe a half a hopper. So
yeah,
I think that that's going to change the way. I think you're going to see a lot more aggressive movement on the break because you're not going to see guys trying to break. You're going to see guys trying to break out a lot more wide, a lot more often,
Right.
and a lot sooner, because especially with semi, you're not going to be able to hold that. You're not as likely to be able to hold that lane as
Right.
effectively, just
Yeah.
because you're not
Yep.
ramping.
Yeah. So instead of obviously maybe like really conserve, like just looking at World Cup, there was a lot of really aggressive play at World Cup because it's World Cup. But in general, a lot of stuff like that you saw, on average, it's just a lot of really conservative breakouts. You've got, people would not necessarily go into the snake off break. They'd hit those, they'd hit those inserts and they'd stay home, and you wouldn't necessarily have guys going out to those corners either, because that's a really, that is a really far run.
At 12.5 ramping, absolutely.
Right. So, it's really easy to sit there and one finger and hold that lane, and you almost don't even have to pay attention. So I absolutely agree. I think more aggressive breakouts. I think more likely. I'm sure we'll see people trying to hit snake 1, snake 2. Maybe even depending on the layout, snake 50 off break. People are going to get into those Doritos off break, which is getting into Dorito side. I think is. Granted, I'm a snake player. I think getting into a Dorito off break at 12.5 ramping was almost harder than getting into the snake. Personally, I think just because, how the fields were always set up, there's always lane blockers or pins or something. I wouldn't doubt that you're going to see guys in Dorito 1, maybe even Dorito 2. I think you're going to see, what Ollie Lang highlighted a lot this year, people running center 50 off break, if the lanes are good, if the lanes are there, which is just, in my opinion, I think it's going to turn, the way the game's played completely on its head. Teams are going to almost have to rethink everything they know about how to play generalized layouts.
Yeah, especially if you became pro or just started playing paintball past 5 years. That's going to be the older people who remember what semi was. A lot of players are just starting off into PSP mode.
Right.
You get some of the younger pros who are 18, 19 years old. All they know is the PSP mode.
Right.
PSP mode, and it kind of highlights a different one, but that we'll kind of get into. But not only does it highlight PSP mode, but the sideline coaching,
right? The
lack of it, which is another big rule change.
Yeah, absolutely. With the way we almost, I almost don't know if it's a bigger impact on the PSP dropping to the 10.2 balls per second or switching to semi-auto for the pros. Granted, there's less of an effect for the rest of the division because they're still going to be shooting that PSP ramping that everybody's used to, so it is, I think, easier skill-wise. I think shooting, I know a lot of people disagree with me. I've always been a proponent of semi-auto. I think it requires more skill. I think it's just a more skill-based, whatever you want to call it. It's just a more skill-based endeavor to shoot semi-auto at that pro level. I think, to me, just makes it so when I'm watching, you're really going to see on the webcast and on TV the separation of good paintball players and great paintball players. That's, personally, I think that's what semi-auto brings to the table.
But you also remember the reason why they brought the PSP mode -3 round burst was cheater boards.
Right.
And somebody needs to police these guns.
Right, which I believe was included in the
release.
In the announcement. They said they were going to have to. It was something about like
factory only boards supplied with only a semi-auto mode.
Yeah, so they're going to come, all these boards for the pros are going to have to come from the factory, Eclipse, Die, Empire, what have you.
Yeah.
But they are going to be separate from the production run. So if I go buy a Vanquish 2.0, it's not going to be the same as Nikki Cuba's. The board in it is going to be different. It's a factory board from Empire, but Nikki Cuba's is going to be specifically made to only have semi-auto.
Yeah, and PSP, they did say that they have ways of testing the boards, because anybody can send a board to get flashed.
Right.
Someone can visually look at it and say, oh, that's a stock board. PSP said that they are going to check every single gun.
Which I have an issue with.
If there's going to be 20 pro teams, correct? 20?
Well, that's kind of the discussion right now. That's a totally different topic, unfortunately. But
yeah,
you see all these big names.
Should be 20 pro teams, if each player brings 2 guns, that's 2,000 guns that the PSP needs to inspect before the event.
Right, that's my problem. And you've got teams, you've got teams like Impact and Heat that are paid. They make money. They are paid to be pro paintballers. They're basically, Heat, I think, more than anything, and I'm not bashing on Heat or anything like that. It's completely fine. It's a professional. If you're going to do a professional sport, this is what happens. Houston Heat is basically a merc team. That's what they are. They try and pay the best of the best with their salary cap, just like any other real sports team in any other real sport, to come play for them and be the best. I think Impact is less a bunch of mercenaries, but they do have a significant budget versus teams like 187, Aftershock, even Dynasty, most of all those guys on Dynasty, a lot of them do have other jobs. A lot of their income is Planet Eclipse giving them extra guns to go sell at PSP events.
Yeah, like
Dynasty, than 187 does.
Teams like that don't have a freaking salary to put towards professional paintball. My problem is you're going to have these guys, like anybody that watched the Aftershock series this past season. Those guys were showing up the day of. They were showing up Thursday freaking morning sometimes.
Yeah, and that's
my problem is, how is the PSP going to check all of these guns when you got teams showing up 8 hours before the freaking event?
Yeah. Yeah, they say they have a system. We'll find out. It's just going to create issues, I think. There's going to be a ref who wants to check a gun, and he's going to say, I think I got 3 shots. I pulled the trigger twice. I think a third ball came out. And then it's going to be another ref we check. And it's just going to slow everything down.
Well, I mean, we have personal experience with, the NEPL back in the day. They would take your gun, and 10 minutes later, you'd be down 2 pods. And now you're starting the game with, back then you only needed maybe 5. But, you're starting this game with 3 pods and 1,500 PSI of air because the ref decided that they didn't think that your gun was legitimate.
Yeah.
And I think that's the concern you're trying to highlight is, now it's completely ref prerogative. It's completely subjective.
Right.
His opinion.
His opinion is that gun isn't correct. And now you also have issues with favoritism. I say his gun is not correct, even though it probably is.
Huge issue with the NPPL.
Absolutely.
I have personal experience with the NPPL and their reffing habits. I think everybody is well aware that NPPL refs were not really actual sanctioned refs.
Yeah, one of my buddies ref for him.
Yep.
So.
I ref for the NPPL. My first year in 2007, when I graduated high school, I went to boot camp for the Navy, and I showed up at my base in Mayport, Florida, which is right outside of Jacksonville. And it just so happened that as soon as I got there, 2 weeks later, NPPL Jacksonville happened. I went out because it's paintball and it's NPPL, and I was like, oh my god, this is perfect. I got to go to this NPPL event. It's right here, and I can go in for free. I ended up reffing pro teams. Yeah. I've got the jacket at home to prove it. I've never done that before. I was out there reffing freaking Aftershock and Dynasty. Like, honestly, guys, come on. Like, they were literally walking around. The NPPL was the epitome of, yo, call the game right, I'll give you my jersey. And that's what happened. And, I think that...
So you have a bunch of jerseys at home, then?
That's what you're telling me.
I will not confirm or deny that I have any such equipment. However, I do have my official NPPL Super 7 windbreaker jacket and a hat. But I certainly think that, that was the point you were hitting on right there is, how if these refs are just taking these guns and stuff like that, the PSP does a very good job, I think, with the professionalism the professionalism of their referees. I think they do an excellent job. It's hard. It's paintball. Everybody's still friends. It's a young sport. It's all buddy. There's no official league for the referees like there is in other sports. And I think they do a solid job. But now if this is how it's going to go down, if these refs are just grabbing people's guns and they're going off and testing them, and that's what's happening. Like you said, what is there to stop them going like, oh yeah, his gun is fine, and walking him back and yeah, maybe his gun's fine. Well, maybe it's not. You know, maybe it is. Maybe it's shooting freaking 320 at like PSP ramp 15. Like, you know.
Yeah. And what if someone puts a breakout mode on their gun?
Right.
Just some guy who's just like, yo, Ollie Lang, send me your gun. Let me flash your board real quick. You know, it's going to go unlimited, full auto, 50 balls a second. When he lets go of the trigger, it's back to semi-auto 12 or 10.2.
Like that mode we found on that DM3 board manual we found the other day. That was the greatest mode of all time.
Yeah.
Pull and hold the trigger for 10 seconds. It goes into uncapped full auto. Like, I think it was capped at like 40 balls a second or something like that.
Yeah, it was cool.
And if you pull and hold the trigger for 10 more seconds, it turns it off. And there was even an instructional guide in the manual for that board of how to confuse the refs for 10 seconds while you held the trigger. It was absolutely great.
Yeah, and I even think Dangerous Powers, their stock boards, I believe those even have breakout modes and stuff like that.
There's a hidden mode on the Lux.
Yeah.
So, the only way to get it is to have the stock manual, paper manual that comes in the box. But there is a hidden mode on the Lux. I don't know what it is because I don't have a stock manual. But you know, like, what's to stop that crap from happening?
Yeah, it's gonna be nothing. It's the honor system, and it's paintballers. Yeah.
Yeah, we all know how that goes.
You know,
yeah.
I think when you look back at this mode, I think, you know, the PSP tries to implement things that are really that they think are going to help the sport overall. You know, this mode switch, you know, turning it to semi and 10.2. You know, more paint's going to be flying because there's more players in the field. It's going to promote movement, which, you know, when you're watching a tournament on you know, the webcasts, you're really excited when that guy makes that move. It's really cool watching.
Yeah.
You know, I was just yesterday, I was in the gym watching CEP against Ironman, I think, and you know, guy from the Ironman dives in the snake and he's one-handed crawling down the snake, one-handed gatting,
And that's awesome.
and he shoots out, you know, his opposite snake guy as he's crawling down on one hand, and then he goes and shoots crossfield. Great, cool. But I think that switching to semi-auto, you're not going to see guys as effectively going one-handed shooting 10.2 or 12.5.
Well, unless
you're
you're
need that.
Fedorov. I think Fedorov will still be...
I think we can all agree Konstantin Fedorov is possibly the greatest person to ever exist on this planet.
And he will be shooting people one-handed, diving into a snake in semi-only.
I had the opportunity to watch Fedorov playing against Infamous at...
MAO?
No, I watched Fedorov playing for a World Cup final.
Oh, yeah.
And Ryan and I were sitting there laughing to ourselves because it's only Fedorov that can that can run standing up to Snake 1 and make it. And then beyond that, he bumped back into the Snake feeder, stood up, shot his way, walking backwards to the corner. And he and I are literally laughing to ourselves because at one point he also goes from Snake corner and like jogs like he shot over to the Dorito that was in that World Cup layout. It was that bad in the back center, kind of offset.
Yeah.
And he literally like jogged over, and we're like, "Oh, Fedorov got shot," and then he just stops, loads, and continues to play. And we're like, I don't know how anybody else could do that. And I watched a lot of pro games on that layout. Nobody was moving like him. It was just incredible.
We were live streaming World Cup here in the pro shop, and then we rewatched it, and then I rewatched it like 3 or 4 more times after that. I don't know about you.
Yeah.
Every single time watching Art Chaos play, watching Fedorov out there is just like, how is he doing that?
Yeah,
he's just like,
he's a magician.
You know, he stands there and he's taking shots and he's like shooting, you know, cross field or something like that, and he just like he stops and you can almost see it like he's like thinking for a second, and he like bends over 45 degrees like back left and just like shoots one paintball and like one random guy's out, and you know he's just sitting there like, yeah, I know, I got this, like I'm good. And it's like, man, come on, dude, like it's not even fair.
Yeah,
it's like. Yeah, it's definitely almost like watching him, you know, conduct a symphony as he's playing. It's just, you know, that barrel is moving back and forth. And
right.
He's literally just, and you're out, and goes back to the left, and you're out, and he's definitely an incredible player to watch.
Yeah, he's listening to Beethoven in his headphones.
Exactly.
He's playing.
Exactly.
Oh, I wouldn't doubt it.
Mozart.
Yeah.
So, I think, you know, over overall, if you had to just take a stance on not semi-auto, but the fact that it's dropping to 10.2, where would y'all stand on that, just in general?
Well, it was already at 10.2
for pros.
For the pros.
But I mean, for now, let's look at it from a divisional standpoint. Now,
yeah, we're the most people. I don't think a lot of pros listen to this. It'll be more of a divisional player who's going to be...
Unless you are pros listening to this, then I very much appreciate it, and you should totally give this video a like and a favorite, and you should absolutely subscribe to my channel and send me a jersey.
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's an us jerseys. That'd be great.
Yeah.
At bare minimum, 7.
Yeah. I'm a big guy, so I'm a big with jersey.
So, well, I mean, for my perspective, the rate of fire change, from a divisional standpoint, I don't see it as being as I'm indifferent to it, I guess. The rate of fire change is going to change the way you play. It's going to allow for much more aggressive breakouts, and I think that point gets highlighted when you're talking about lower division.
Yeah.
Guys that are D5, D4, those guys are the type of guys that are trying to make the breakouts, and I mean, you can make an aggressive breakout. You can even be shooting that lane. You're not necessarily going to get them.
Right.
You look at the pros when they're playing. There are guys literally shooting the lane that guys make it through. I mean, now subtract the fact that you're on the move as a lower division player. You're not as likely to get them anyway, and now you're shooting even less pain. So it's going to allow that aggressiveness.
And I absolutely agree, because you look at the lower division players like D4, even D3, and I'm not trying to knock on anybody. We're all lower division players here.
Absolutely.
D4, D3 is where people can make mistakes and sloppy play, and you can get away with it.
Yeah.
Because we are not at that skill level. The pros, you can't do that.
You leave an inch, you're out.
You make a sloppy breakout, and you're 2.5 seconds behind where you should be trying to run into Snake 1, especially that far of a run. In the pros, you're going to get shot out.
Absolutely.
Like, no problem. Can you do that in D4? There's probably a 70% chance that you won't, probably higher chance that you'll probably still be fine. We're just not at the skill level where that kind of stuff is taken advantage of, just because we're just not there.
Here's a great story to highlight that. I played World Cup this last year, D4 race to 2. And we had a breakout planned. I was supposed to go to this one bunker. I had been going to this one bunker. It was working great. My back player, we were sending 3 snake side, 2 D side. I was our D1. My guy playing behind me. So the horn goes off. I break out. I see a guy, as I'm breaking out, I see a guy that's obviously making a 50 center run. The 50 center in that was very easy to hit.
Yeah.
So I had found that if I stopped and shot in a very particular place, the guy would almost always run through the screen. And because of the other bunkers on the field, I was pretty much blocked as I was standing there. So I stopped as I was running in, which was not the plan. And I'm shooting, and all of a sudden my back player ran right into me. He hit me and fell off of me all over the ground. I stumbled forward, continued to shoot, missed the guy unfortunately, but managed to break out. My back player stood up and ran to the corner and made it. That should not happen.
That would have never happened in a pro game.
But you're talking
just because of that, in an actual pro champions or challengers game, 2 more of your team would have got shot out just because that happened.
Somehow. They probably would have shot themselves at that point.
Exactly.
So, needless to say,
throwing the towel on that one.
After the fact, I get a good laugh out of it, but needless to say, when that happened, it was like, oh my goodness. I'm glad I'm not on a webcast right now.
I probably tend to agree with overall the rate of fire change in the divisional as indifferent, just because of the skill levels that you're talking about with those lower divisions. I think it's not going to certainly have as big of an impact, as people might think it has, because honestly, I think the rate of fire and the skill level combination between those two was already at almost the same equal balance, where you're probably not even going to notice it, to be relatively honest with you. So on that point, to wrap up the rate of fire thing, semi-auto for the pros, where do you guys stand on that?
I hate it.
Okay.
Oh, good talk. Okay. All right, moving on.
Thanks for elaborating.
No problem.
I'm kind of again indifferent to it. I mean, I'm not a pro, so it doesn't really affect me directly. But I think that it's definitely going to highlight individual skills. There's too many times when you're watching a webcast when the guy is out one side of the bunker and he's out one side of the bunker shooting, one finger not even looking, and he's looking out the other side.
Right.
He's sitting there 3-4 seconds, and then he'll finally grab the front of his gun and continue to play out the side of the bunker. But you're not going to be able to hold down a lane like that effectively with the movement of the gun and everything. It's just going to change the way. It's going to change the way the pros play for sure, and I'm kind of excited for it.
Yeah. I have to agree with Joe here. My personal opinion is that semi-auto, I think, undoubtedly brings out true, it's not the entire story, granted, obviously, but I do think it brings out a level of true skill within a pro player, and it's gonna bring out, I think, a whole new way of approaching how teams are going to be able to function on the field as a team. So you don't have, like you said, you have that back guy sitting there holding that freaking lane, and he's just over staring at the opposite freaking corner, just holding his gun outside the bunker, holding the lane. He's not going to be able to do that. So now you got two things going on. One, he's going to need to be focused on that lane, and that lane is probably not going to be as efficient as it would if it was on PSP ramping, because it's not consistent. Maybe he's...
I think it's going to be pretty consistent.
Maybe he's not better, righty than he is lefty. He's not going to be able to consistently hold that lane as well, and he's not going to be able to adapt to that better. And then the second part of that is now you're taking vision away. He might have been, his whole game plan sitting in that back corner might have been holding that lane, but he's also able to watch the whole snake side of the field if he's on D corner or whatever. Now, because he has to actually focus and hold that lane because he's shooting semi, you lose vision of a back player watching the opposite side of the field, which is huge. As a snake, I play snake front. As a snake front guy, I almost depend. The only thing I depend on my snake corner guy is shooting my tape and making sure their snake corner, or their snake guy is not going to run down and bunker me. I depend more on either my home guy or my D corner shooting cross to try and actually shoot those people out. And, make sure there's nobody in, like, that center 50 that's going to come up and pop me in the head or something like that. So I think that's going to have a huge effect. And, as you said, I absolutely agree. I think it's going to bring out a lot more skillful play, which, as a spectator, I'm super excited to see. I think you're going to see mediocre players that are cutting it because it's PSP. That might start to fall and become below average players, and I think you're gonna see. I would hope you're gonna see players that have the skill but wasn't necessary because you were playing PSP start to, really put themselves out and become those better players and become recognizable as better players. For a spectator side, I think that's cool. That's what I want to see. So I'm cool with it. As far as playing, I'm playing it, D4. That doesn't affect me. I'm still shooting PSP ramping, so I don't care about that.
Until next year when they change it to everybody.
Yeah, and that seems to be PSP's.
I think you meant till I bump up to Pro Division next year, but that's okay.
Yeah, that just seems to be the way PSP kind of does it. Is we're going to implement these changes on Pro so everybody can watch the webcast and decide that they're not all evil,
right?
And then we're going to apply it to everybody else.
Yeah. And I think a big part of that is, this is a young sport.
Yeah.
And I'm not even talking about like the 30-ish years paintball's been around. I'm talking like the modern PSP has been around for what, maybe 10 years. If that, the way the modern pro tournament game is played, hasn't been around for.
And they have been changed. They do have change every year.
It's barely been around for a decade. We're still, at this point, we're still figuring out how the hell to play the damn game. At this point, which it's so young. Like I honestly, if I try and think about it that way, I can't fault them on it because, we're still trying. The whole reason tournament paintball started like it is today was to make a spectator version of it.
Right.
So if we're trying to take this seriously, we're honestly, the PSP I'm sure, is literally trying to just figure out how the hell to play the game to make it good.
Well, make it good, make it spectator friendly, and try to find that right balance between, you know, we went from a sport that was fun for the player, and now they're trying to find a way to balance that with fun for spectator.
Right.
You know, anytime you watch paintball on TV, usually it's not particularly fun because it's hard to follow unless you understand what you're looking at.
Yeah, it's almost impossible. You're looking at like a bunch of people. You can't even half the time see paint shooting in the air, so it looks like a bunch of guys just kneeling down in the middle of a turf field and nothing's happening.
Yeah, they try to find that balance.
Yeah, so they're trying to find that balance. The sport barely, modern rules wise, I think has almost barely been around for a decade. So there's I just kind of assume there's gonna be rule changes all the damn time. And that it is what it is. Unfortunately, us who are here right now playing it and stuff like that, we're just stuck in a bad time with it, which is unfortunate. But it's gonna need to happen if we want our sport to continue and succeed and become a legitimate professional sport like we all want it to.
Yeah, and then on a side note too, with other professional sports that have been around a lot longer, football.
Yeah, how many times have they changed the rules in football?
Yeah,
I mean,
baseball, same thing. Like they're getting different rules.
Look at pro football. How long did it take professional football to take the field goal post out of the dead center of the end zone and actually put it behind the end zone off the freaking field so people weren't running into the damn things? That took what, like 30 years?
Changing where they do the kickoffs.
Right, yeah, exactly. They're changing rules all the time. They just have the the advantage of being around for, I mean, granted, football's been around for what, like a century? Modern football's been around for, I don't know, like 50 years ish. I'm not super expert about it. But the PSP is going to be going through the same thing if we want this to be legitimate, and we're barely at we're not even at a decade.
Yeah, there's definitely going to be growing pains. You're just going to have to, as players, we have to bear with it. It often seems like, and I know a lot of player frustration stems from the fact that it doesn't feel like the league listens to the players. They seem to be making changes that they see.
Right.
But maybe, I know that a lot of the discussion, I just read that I was reading from Nick Sloviak talking to, I think his name is Lane Wright, the guy that runs PSP.
Yep.
He and Lane had a discussion about what the rule changes were and why they were. And, Nick was dead set against it at first. After after talking about it, after working through it, he agrees with the changes. But again, you might not see all of the objectives that they're trying to accomplish.
Right. Yeah. Everything we're talking about here is just pure speculation. All the three of us are very experienced paintball players. We've all been around the sport for a long time. So we can see maybe some of the deeper things from the rule changes that maybe some people can't see. Because we're really thinking about this with a better understanding of paintball and tournament paintball in general. But even even the guys at the PSP, there's probably things that went into their decision making that we're not even thinking of and probably won't think of.
Right.
So who knows what's going on with that.
For sure. See, beyond the rate of fire thing, I think some of the other rule changes are much more exciting.
Yeah, absolutely, which we can go ahead and start to get into. Let's go ahead and move on to the next big rule change. So, in going into the next big rule change, which is almost just as big, I think, as the rate of fire and the semi and all that whole deal, is all this talk about the coaching and how, for the pros, it will completely not exist, and for divisional, it will kind of half not exist. So basically what's going on there is, as far as divisional is going, for everybody in the lower skill divisions, such as ourselves, and I would assume pretty much everybody listening, unless Fedorov is listening, then I apologize, that there is going to be no stadium coaching or crowd coaching or whatever you want to call it. For the divisionals, however, there is still going to be sideline coaching.
Strictly because it's impossible to enforce on the divisionals.
Correct. Yeah. And as far as that goes, with the pros, there is just no sideline, stadium crowd, whatever you want to call it. There's no coaching, period, exclamation point, semicolon, comma, whatever, period. It's just not supposed to be existent whatsoever.
It's not there. And I am honestly more excited about that change than I am about any other that they've announced so far. You know, coming from an old school background, you know, anybody that played years and years ago, even to think that somebody would stand on the sidelines and scream out about where everybody was is completely foreign to me. Especially in I took a break for about 3 years at one point, and then finally came back to the sport only recently. Actually, maybe even longer than that. But when I came back and everybody was telling me, "Oh yeah, they're sideline coaching, and they're going to tell you not only what you're doing, but where you're running, where to shoot," it just completely blew my mind. I mean, that's part of the whole advantage, or part of the whole, I guess, what made you a good paintball player was having that field awareness to know yourself where you should be looking. Look at the rest of the players on your side and say, these are the guys, you know, this is where I'm supposed to be looking for, this is where I'm supposed to be looking, this is what I'm supposed to be doing. I'm excited to see pro paintball get back to having, you know, the guys knowing where they're supposed to go, what they're supposed to do, and not have to be told about what's left on the field. You know, that's what I'm really excited about. I love this change personally.
That should be part of the game in the first place. That should just be tournament paintball like 101, like any other professional sport. Granted, you've got how many countless thousands of people in the audience, so you wouldn't understand it anyway. But like how garbage is that you know, people are on the other side shouting out where other people are on the field, like what?
Well, the whole rule, just like the whole PSP mode of shooting, it was invented out of necessity. It was impossible for them to coach or to stop players in the stadiums from basically coaching, you know, the players. You know, anybody can just be in the grandstands, on the sidelines, they're watching the games, and they're just yelling. Even if you're a fan, you might be part of the team, but what PSP decided to do to basically kind of make it more fair is just saying, fine, we're going to allow coaching. People are doing it anyways. We can't police it. So let's just, instead of it being against the rules, now they allow it. But now they're getting away from it again. A lot of the players liked it. I know 2 years ago at World Cup, you know, a Snake player, they'd dive into Snake and right away they would just look to the crowd and they would say, where is everybody?
Right, exactly. And, you know, there's guys right there in that front row of those bleachers being like, hey, there is a guy in your mirror in S2. That's a huge advantage. Like, how, like, that's supposed to be part of the game. Like, if you were a Snake guy in there, like me, I play Snake front. If I dove into Snake 2, and then every time, I just automatically knew there was someone in Snake 1 or there was someone in Snake 2. To me, that's kind of bullshit.
Yeah.
Like, I shouldn't know unless I'm if I work some way to physically go out and see that there's a guy in there, that's the only way I think that I should be able to know, unless, like, my teammate yelled it out or whatever. Like, somebody spectating on the sideline that has, like, an eagle-eye view of the whole field is shouting out. To me, that's just complete, like, BS. Like, that should not be a part of it.
Yeah, but they just had to do it. They had to make it legal because they could not police the crowd.
Well, that's the thing, though. I think that there was an opportunity there, and they went the exact opposite direction. You look at watching golf. Everybody's dead silent when that shot is being made. Everybody's still dead silent. They'll clap, but they're relatively quiet.
Yeah.
I mean, all you have to do is watching finals at this last World Cup, they had a guy that was literally walking back and forth during the Dynasty Infamous match, just walking back and forth, making sure that the type of coaching was at least to a certain point, because the rule was that you couldn't be on the metal fence there.
Yeah.
Right. Yep.
They had to at least be up on the stand. Now,
they had to be sitting.
And they had to be, in theory, had to be sitting.
The rule was they had to be sitting.
They had to be sitting, but I saw several several different pro games where that was not the case.
Right. I definitely remember seeing the line of like security guards like hanging out there on the fence.
Absolutely. And I mean, that's what I mean. There are opportunities, and then there's an opportunity for the PSP to have gone a different direction. And it seems like they swung one way, now we're swinging hard the other way.
Yeah.
We're going to try it until we find that happy medium, and that just seems to be the way it is. Like I said, I love it. I can't wait to watch webcast where the guy makes a run through and he does it and he shoots all 5 guys because somebody on the sidelines isn't screaming that there's, if there's a back center, the guy runs straight up to back center and shoots left, shoots right, and nobody happens to be looking into the center of the field. That's a communications issue that gets broken down. And how many times, even with coaching, did you see that last year? Watching Shane Pastana running through the center and shooting 2 or 3 guys. It was fun to watch. And the only reason he got shot was because, there's somebody from the sideline screaming that the center of the field or whatever.
Right. Yeah. I absolutely agree. My thing is like, somebody's snake front or something like that. He's in like snake 1 or snake 2 or whatever like that. He's got the awareness, and his team helped him and has the awareness, not taking anything from like spectators or whatever. His team did a good enough job to where he knows that certain, people on the opposite team are facing and shooting one way. Nobody's looking at him for that split moment. He has that opportunity, and his team is skilled enough to afford him that opportunity where he gets up from the snake and he starts doing a run through. He shoots out his mirror in the snake, and maybe there's someone in the snake corner, maybe there's whatever, but he does a run through and he runs down the snake and he's able to shoot everybody on the opposing team because they're all looking the wrong way, because his team was good enough to afford that and communicate that to him that was an available option, and he had the skill as a player to know how to do it and to actually do it. And I think, what's going on right now is, right now you see that in the PSP, somebody gets up to do a run through in the snake, everybody starts screaming, the whole other team instantly knows something is happening.
That's not going to change, though.
And you can't stop people from screaming and making general noise in general.
Right, like a hockey game.
But there's people
they start shooting at the net, the crowd goes crazy.
Right, but there's people standing there in that crowd yelling snake run through or whatever the hell they're yelling.
Yeah.
The point is everybody on the opposite team immediately knows to turn their guns over and shoot this guy making a break through the snake. And to me, he's getting penalized for something. He's getting penalized for being a good player on a good team. And the opposing team that is not as skilled is just getting this random bonus because some fan in the stands yelled out that he was coming. It all brings it back. I just think it's complete nonsense. Like, how, to me, it's absurd that this guy is going to get penalized for being a good player.
Yeah.
I think you're gonna highlight individual player skill a lot more effectively. And I think, when you look at all the rule changes that they've made, it seems like everything is bringing it back to the individual player themselves. You don't have this, not everybody is on even keel with a rate of fire change. Not everybody is on keel, or not everybody is on the same level when you say, all right, now everybody has to pull the trigger themselves.
Yeah.
There's going to be differences in every player with that. Oh, now you have to figure out where they are on the field. You can't be told that. That's an individual player skill. And you have to communicate that. Yeah. So, you're highlighting a lot of things. You're highlighting a lot of individual player skills that have been taken out. And I think that in general is going to make a more effective, or the best team on the field is literally going to be the best team on the field, individually and as a team. I think you're just going to see player performances increase in that way.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. I think, before you had a lot of, not saying that there wasn't any skill involved in it before, there's tons of skill involved in it, regardless of how the rules were before. Obviously, there was tons of skill involved. They're pro players for a reason. There's a reason I'm not playing on Arc Chaos or Dynasty or something like that. Yeah. I don't have that skill. I think before, though, there was a lot of skill involved, but there was also a lot of leveling of the playing fields where a lot of teams could get away with stuff that one, they could make mistakes and they wouldn't get punished for it. One team could be so superiorly, I don't know if that's a word.
It is today.
Have so much superior skill to another team, but it didn't necessarily translate into that game and how that game went because of how these rules were set up to level the playing field between a lot of players. I think I can't really think of any examples just right off the tip of my tongue, and I think with these rules the way they are, I think certain teams that maybe we're used to seeing make it to Sunday and make it into quarterfinals and that kind of stuff, we're just not going to see in Sunday because they've lost that element of the equal playing field that they had before. That I'm not saying that was their team strategy, was to rely on those, but it certainly, I think, helped. Yeah. And now I think we're going to face a lot of teams that might not make it to Sunday. And I think, maybe we'll see teams that do make it to Sunday consistently and start doing a lot better because it's down to a lot more individual skill base. Like, look at the Russian Legion this year. A lot of young kids, they're trying to restart their team. I think they got a lot of talent on their team. I have no idea how their season would have went if these new rule changes were going through this past season.
Yeah.
But there's a significant possibility because I think they have a lot of good talent, individually within those kids. With taking out all this equal playing field crap that has happened because of the rules, what's to say that Red Legion wouldn't have made it to Sunday every single tournament because those kids have just a lot of skill between them.
Yeah.
And maybe somebody like Damage, where they're, I'm not saying, I'm just using them as a random example. I'm not saying any which way about Damage themselves. Maybe their game plan was such and they don't have the individual skill base that congeals as a team to form an overall team skill. Maybe it just wasn't as good. Maybe they wouldn't have made finals all year, something like that.
Yeah.
I think it's definitely gonna bring a lot more of a true skill-based playing field rather than equalizing everything out. And it almost relates to me back to like the way little league sports are now today with little kids. I think we all grew up with, if you lost, well, you lost.
Yeah.
Today, almost 2015, the last place T-ball team still gets a freaking trophy.
Yeah.
And obviously it's not the same, but I think that kind of mentality was going into it. It kind of relates to it, I think.
In that respect, I think paintball is the exact opposite. I think unless you take first, you took last.
Right.
You know what I mean? Everybody else, any paintball player you talk to, even the guy that took second is going to be angry, and they're more focused on the fact that they didn't finish and actually take the first place.
Yeah.
And
right. And
they're more focused on that.
I think that's how it should be.
I completely agree. It's funny because you were talking about
my team,
the pussification of America. The pussification of us as a society, and the fact that everybody gets a trophy, but in paintball, second place got a trophy, but they're still pissed off.
My team this year in MPS, we came in second 3 times, and then we came in like 4th or 5th or 6th or whatever the hell we came in. I'm sure there's a lot of people that would have looked at that and like, bro, we got second 3 times this year. Like, that's awesome. I'm totally cool. No, screw that. We were pissed that we never got a first place when we knew we were better than that, and we knew we played better than that. We were pissed. We went into Event 5, and we played probably the best paintball I've ever played in my life because we were so pissed off that we never won a first place. Mm-hmm. And then we finally did win first place, and we look back at it. I remember overhearing some of the other guys from the teams. They're just talking, overhearing their conversations, saying, wow, those guys legitimately won first place. Like, they really deserved it. And I felt like goddamn right we did. Because we played so damn well because we were pissed off, and that's how it should be. And I think, it's second place is second place. You came in second best, and it is what it is. You know, there is always going to be a second place. You know, somebody's going to come in second. There's always going to be a better team, but I think there does need to be a distinction, and there needs to be a drive, and there should be a hunger. I think natural competitiveness, and that should exist. You know, and now that it's pure skill based, I think more now than ever. I think that's more valid than it ever was before.
I think we're going to see a lot of really different paintball than we did for seasons past. I'm really excited for it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just hoping that it's enjoyable to watch.
I can only assume that because the more individual player skill based it gets, I can only assume that it's going to be more exciting to watch. In my mind, that's how it plays out anyway.
Yeah.
The only thing I will comment on that is you had mentioned damage earlier. They're very much a pocket paintball, conservative breakout, control lanes.
Yeah, and I use them completely as an example.
Absolutely.
You know, I don't know.
But unfortunately, their skill set and the way that they've developed their team and their process they're the exact type of team that I think is going to have the rules change are going to have a very detrimental effect on. Mm-hmm. They're a great team, but they play a very specific game.
Yep.
It's unfortunate because, you know, they are a great team. They do what they do, but they're not. Their skill set isn't going to be highlighted by this. I think teams like Aftershock that are super hungry, always fast. You know, some of the fastest. You know, what is it, Markowski?
He just went to.
Yeah,
Markowski just went to. When did he go to Heat or something like that?
No, he went to.
Where did he go?
I forget.
Yeah, brain fire.
X Factor.
Yeah. X Factor.
X Factor.
But I think.
Yeah, lots of individual skill, really good skill.
Yeah, but I mean, teams that are super aggressive, I think are gonna benefit the most from this because yes, it is semi. Yes, it is 10.2, but the aggressive teams are getting into those positions now. It's more positional paintball that I think that it's been in recent time.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, just like right off the bat, you know, just going on that example, I can probably, you know, just look at what this upcoming PSP season is going to be. If Art Chaos was still here, I think they would be up in first, second, and third every single event because they are extremely aggressive, which to me, you know, Houston Heat is basically the Art Chaos lineup at this point. Yeah. I think Houston Heat will play very well this season, extremely well. I think Impact will play very well this season as they have been. They've always got a super hungry. They've got really aggressive players. You know, you've got J-Reb in there, who's just an amazing paintball player. He's always making those key aggressive moves, looking to do things that nobody's thinking of, or, you know, work down the field and put pressure, you know, on teams that, you know, other teams don't do. Aftershock, I absolutely agree. I think is one of those teams. They have that aggressive skill set. All their players have a lot of individual skill and are aggressive and they are hungry. I think Aftershock will place a lot better consistently this year.
Than they did at the end.
Yeah, maybe X Factor. I think will maybe do the same. You know, X Factor is always a hungry team. You know, they've got a pretty good legacy at this point, but they're not, you know, kind of sitting and laying back, just happy that they're playing pro. You know, they're definitely really aggressive. You know,
they're hungry.
Yeah, and you know, as far as teams that maybe are going to be a little bit, you know, detrimented from the rule changes, thinking about it now, I think you're right. I think damage will be, you know, this will be detrimental to damage. I think this will be detrimental to guys like Iron Men. I think they play a lot of the same way damage does. I think they play really conservatively. I think this will hurt them more than help them until they start getting, you know, some fresh talent in there and some different guys starting to rotate in. You know, obviously Vicious is not going to be around. You know,
interesting to see where some of the Vicious guys end up.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely.
You know, when I read the farewell letter,
yeah,
it was obvious that some of the guys had real life come up. You know, we all do. I quit for years because of real life.
Yeah,
it happens to all of us. It'll be really interesting to see the guys that want to continue to play pro, where they end up. That's what I'm excited for.
Yeah, they're hungry for it. You know, I think I was just gonna bring up another team. I think the Russian Legion. I think it could be a toss up. Yeah, I think they have a lot of young, aggressive talent. I really don't know how that's going to go though, because of the way the coaching style. That Russian Legion coaching style. I don't know how that's going to go.
Well, it was a big advantage every year when you had one person yelling only Russian.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. No.
It's not like you had to worry about being counter-coached.
Yeah. No. Absolutely. What was I was going to bring up one more big team, Dynasty.
Yeah.
I could honestly Dynasty going either way.
Dynasty's got a deep roster of
they've got a deep roster
players.
of solid talent, but I think that's the key. They are older players. They're starting. If we were talking about like 2007 MPPL Dynasty, they were the most aggressive team out there besides obviously that controversial final Joy Division.
Yeah.
They were the guys. There's a reason they won that many pro events. That many years in a row. Nowadays. Yeah, you got Ollie Lang running center 50 off break, but how many times is he going to be able to pull that off and not get shot, or pull that off and actually be effective with it? I can almost see Dynasty leaning more towards like the Damage Ironmen, teams where they do play a little bit more conservatively than maybe they used to, because they're getting older, their play styles are starting to change.
Prone to injury. You have Ryan Greenspan out for at least an event this year because of a knee injury.
Right. That could be another team where these rule changes actually start to hurt them, and you've got guys coming in that were always right there chomping at the bit, just underneath them. Guys like Aftershock, that now with these rule changes, they're just so aggressive with these rule changes. We might see Dynasty go out there and just get 7-0. By guys like X Factor. I would absolutely not be shocked if I saw that. Granted, I don't think it's going to happen all the time, but
yeah,
Dynasty's also shown a resilience through a lot of the years.
Yeah, absolutely. I don't think Dynasty is going to be like bottom 5 or anything like that.
No, they're not really going anywhere.
I can definitely see Dynasty placing more mid road this season than.
I can't picture them being mid road though.
It's because we grew up with Dynasty winning every event.
Yeah, I know. It's just that's the whole thing. It's like people who live in New Hampshire or the younger, you always know the Patriots and the Red Sox, even the Bruins, like as a winning team, they're always up there.
But if you were around for anything before 15 years ago and you were a Patriots fan, you had a hard life.
Or even a New England fan in general.
Yeah.
Had a hard life.
Yeah.
I mean, pre-03.
Yeah,
303. I mean,
Red
that's
Sox.
Red Sox and Patriots won that year, and then before that, it was like
before that, you had a big stretch, but unless you were old enough to be around for the Celtics in the 70s and the 80s,
right?
As a New England sports fan, you had a tough deal.
Yeah.
I think it will certainly be interesting, and I think there'll be a lot more sway of lower end teams. I didn't even mention Chattanooga CEP or like Seattle Thunder or VCK or Revo.
Yeah.
Well, VCK, I actually just heard, is disbanded.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So it's one of and the thing is, it happened almost immediately after the rule change, and they just finished signing with GI for 2015. So you have to wonder how much the rule changes actually, changed their opinion. From what I understand, a lot of their players have the same situation that I was just commenting on. Real life catches up with all of us at some point.
Kids work, college, money. Yeah, it's all significant.
All of that makes
real
a
issues,
difference,
and that obviously the PSP and professional paintball is not a professional playing sport as other professional sports. Be it hockey, baseball, football, whatever.
Nobody's pulling up in a Maserati.
Absolutely not. People are pulling up in Honda Civics and Toyota Tundras. So, it's. I think it'll definitely be interesting to see where the rankings are this year. Just in general overview of that, I think Impact and Heat will be right up there, like usual, like where everyone expects them to be, because they got a lot of individual talent, and that's why they were good in the first place, and they're good enough that I think they'll maintain that ranking. I think you'll see a lot of teams that were bordering on top 3, maybe top 5, maybe drop. I think you'll see a lot of teams that are in the bottom start to move up. It's definitely gonna be interesting. I'm definitely looking forward to this 2015 PSP season for sure.
Yeah,
I think you'll see a lot of different players have breakout games, breakout situations. because it's gonna, points are gonna be won by an individual player.
Yeah.
Just doing a breakout move that can no longer be countercoached out of the game.
Right.
Just like we were commenting.
Because you can't lane his breakout. Now.
Yeah. Or not even that. You can't counter coach his move that he's making.
Right.
A move that might be a lot more steps and might be a lot more methodical as you're moving through the center. Using this bunker, that bunker to block the guy that would be able to shoot you. That can no longer be counter coached out. So you're going to see a lot more individual breakout moves, and that's what I'm excited for. I think both 10.2, semi, and no coaching are going to highlight those players, those moves. You're going to see a lot of really exciting paintball that you didn't get to see with the rules the way they were.
You're gonna, I absolutely agree. I think you're gonna see good players that have that become great players and become superstars, and you're gonna see it, and it's gonna be exciting. So with that, let's go ahead and move on to pretty much what is the last rule change that was really publicly released, and right off the bat, like I don't know if this is as much of a big effect as the rate of fire or the sideline coaching.
I think this is the biggest.
Interesting.
Yeah. All right. So the layouts are not going to be released until roughly 21 hours before the pros get to play it. It's going to affect the teams immensely. Building the whole brotherhood of the team. When you have teams where the core team will be based out of Houston or so, but then you have 3 or 4 of your top players, they live somewhere else. So now they're flying.
Aftershock, perfect example, as we saw in the Aftershock series this year. You got guys 3 hours away that can't make all the team practices, and they show up for like 5 hours, and then they're gonna drive home.
Yeah, so they need to fly for their practices, and they need to make the best out of that practice on both playing the layout, which in the past they've had a 3-week notice of the layout.
Mm-hmm.
So now they have no layout to practice, and it's going to be harder for the team to build as a team because you're not playing with that person all the time. I don't know. It's just I don't know where I'm going with it, really. See, you know what I'm talking about.
I absolutely do, but it's exactly what you're saying is why I actually love the rule change. I think that you're now. I mean, 187 has an advantage with most of their players being in New England. They can all practice together for the event. Now, obviously, let's subtract the fact that they can't necessarily play it outdoors, and playing indoors is a little different, and the geography differences between the teams. But you have a real advantage with being able to take your players, and then everybody is on even keel. Doesn't matter if your guys are all in the same spot or if your guys are flying in. Everybody starts 21 hours ahead of your first game, your potential first game, with the exact same advantage. I'm kind of excited because I'm gonna go to events. I'm gonna watch the first pro event, and I'm gonna be sitting next to every other single pro at 8 a.m. on Friday morning because everybody's gonna watch every pro game they can until their game.
Yep.
Everybody is starting from an even keel, other than the guys who are playing at 8 a.m.
Right.
You know what I mean? I think that your schedule becomes a whole lot more important when you look at this situation, because
you
now
want the afternoon bracket.
You want the afternoon bracket as much as possible. I think that although you balance that with, I want the morning bracket of the very first part of the event and the afternoon bracket for the second day, because not only do I get to play it first with nobody else having an advantage, but now I have the afternoon bracket where now we've been able to go back and watch all of the webcasts from the first day, get an idea of what's working for other players. I mean, I'm really excited about that. I love the fact that, and I love it on both the pro perspective and I love it from a divisional perspective as well, because from the pro perspective, everybody's on even keel 100%. Everybody has the same time to study the event, or study the layout rather, at the same time. Because if your game, if you're in the afternoon bracket on Saturday or Friday rather, you have the exact same amount of time before your first game as the guys that you're playing.
Yeah.
Everybody has the exact same amount of time. I love that.
Yeah.
I think you were talking, geography-wise, your players flying in and whatnot. Everybody's on even keel. If that layout is released at 11 a.m., I guarantee every pro team's going to have their guy there by 11 a.m. on Thursday.
Right.
And basically, just for anyone that didn't actually read like the press release or anything, just to spark note it. Basically, what's going on is, obviously, as everybody's used to, the layouts for the next PSP event used to be, a really huge thing. It was, publicized on like PB Nation and everything. It was a really big thing. Oh man, the new layout's here, and everybody would get to go practice it. Even down to like us, even in like PSP affiliate leagues. Because our fields were like the pro event. The whatever the last PSP layout was, or whatever, or what the upcoming was, depending on the timing. Which was awesome. So it was always a big deal and stuff. So basically, what's going on, to simplify it, is the layouts for the Pro Champions and Challengers division will not be released basically until 11 a.m. Thursday, the day before the event. The event starts Friday, so there's no 3-week notice. There's no nothing. Obviously, during the first event, that's not going to be a problem for the Pro Champions and Challengers, because they're going to release it basically 20 hours before the event throughout the entire year. That's only for pro. For the divisional guys, everything that's not pro, what's going on is during each event, the field layout that they will be playing is going to be the pro layout from the previous event. So at event 2, D1, D2, D3, D4, D5 will all be playing on the layout that pro guys, Nikki Cuba and everybody, were playing at event 1. Obviously, there's a little bit of a gap there, so what they're going to do for event 1 for all the divisional guys is they'll release a custom layout 3 weeks ahead of time just for the divisional guys, and it'll basically be just a one-time layout, because they're going to be continuing to pre-release divisional layouts, whereas the pro guys, like they will the entire season, won't see the layout until the day before the event. After that, obviously, whatever the pro layout is at the first event of the year will be the divisional layout for the second event, and so on and so forth. So the divisional guys will have their standard time,
except for the finals.
Except for the actual finals, which I'll get into that in a second. They'll have their standard amounts of time, basically just like they're all used to, where they'll have time to go practice on the field and get everybody together, and everybody can fly in and practice, and you can really hammer down your lanes and where you can shoot and what your breakouts are going to be. And basically, not too much is going to be changing for divisional guys as far as that's concerned, with one exception where the championship games, the finals games, will be a different layout. I don't quite remember.
It will be the pro.
It will play the pro layout.
It will be okay. All right, that's that.
And it only makes sense because they're not going to tear down the pro field just to set up a different field.
All right, yeah, that was the one piece of information that I just couldn't remember there. So the divisional game for finals will be that pro layout. So
and no coaching.
And no coaching as well. That was definitely a big thing. I don't know if we forgot to note that in the previous.
I think we mentioned it, but I mean that's definitely the two big differences. And
absolutely. That's a massive difference. If you're going through that whole tournament with sideline coaching, and then all of a sudden, oh man, we're in the finals.
Different layout, no sideline.
Different layout. Coach can't even talk to you. That's huge.
Yeah.
It's huge, and it's so off to the point where, unless even in Division 1, I think it's going to be so hectic to the point where I don't know if any one team can go into Division 1 into any tournament and know that maybe they should be sending guys to go watch the pros all day because they know they're going to be in the finals or whatever. I don't think even in Division 1 you can have that.
Well, by the end of Saturday, you're going to know if you're in the finals, so you can go back and kind of watch the webcast, get a better idea about what other teams are doing.
Right,
or what pro teams are doing.
Which is, as far as a layout goes, I think is an extremely limited amount of time. Absolutely. I know even for us,
not being able to play it. I mean,
right, even for us, playing D5 NPS this past year, I don't know if we would have performed as well at specific events if we weren't able to play the layout for like 2 weeks.
Right.
If we were only able to go back and watch video of guys playing on the layout that we were about to play on for like, I don't know how many, like 5 or 6 hours before you had to go to bed so you could get up in the morning. Like, is that to the point where it's even like, maybe you'd be like, oh, look, they got a guy in the snake like 5 times out of 8. Let's go with that. Like, how much are you actually going to be able to get out of that? Just watching video, you can't play it.
I mean, and unless you're making that run and having the experience about, all right, I run, let's say 30 steps or 15 steps to the right. I run straight at a pin that blocks me, and then I dive in. That's something that you learn and you do by muscle memory. You learn to physically do. Repetition.
Right, which is that is just not going to be possible at this point, which is going to be, and I think this ties into all 3 of the big rule changes that we've seen and talked about here, where I think everything is directing towards more skill player. More player skill bases, and the better the individual skill of the individual player, the better that team is going to do, and the better that team and that coach and those players can function together and put all their skill together to make a combined team effort. I think all 3 of these big rule changes are really just small rule changes under the umbrella of be better skilled players. I think is really what this is driving at, which it's all encompassing under. I think the superstars are going to become better, or if they don't have individual skill, they're going to become worse. Good players are going to become great. Mediocre players are going to become poor, and I think it's all.
I think so too.
Yeah, it's all stuff that just kind of ties in together. It all comes down to just player skill.
Yeah, and it's just so weird where it's going to be, Infamous is going to ask Dynasty to practice 2 weeks before the event, and then it's going to go to their field, and they'd be like, "Oh, let's just set up the field this way."
Right, exactly.
And
Maybe maybe they play
foreign.
the last layout from the last event just to play each other. Who knows? But
yeah, I mean, the whole thing is, as a professional, like I want them to know that field, like the back of their hand.
Right.
I don't.
You don't.
I don't. You're talking about knowing. I think part of, again, highlighting individual skill is being able to go back to the old school days when we used to play, and we used to literally have to get there for 6 a.m. and spend an hour walking every single field and coming up with a game plan for every
Remember
single
going to
field.
Cape Cod? What they have 8, 12 fields?
Yeah, at least 8. Yeah.
And with that was fun back then because there was no way of knowing what field you're playing. They had 8 to 12 fields.
Or practicing it.
And you might be playing the same field 3 times out of 6 of the games, so you're like,
Well, by that third game, you kind of had a feel for kind of had a feel for it. You weren't one. I mean, the pro guys right now are running 200, 300, 400 points on an individual field to practice within 2 weeks.
Right. They get 3 weeks of practice where I know from personal industry knowledge and information that these pro guys are practicing this stuff so much they're going through one team like Infamous goes through 3 or 4 skids of paint a week practicing before an event.
Yeah, but that's the whole thing is I want these people to know that field so well that it makes the game more exciting versus both teams off the break they get to their bunkers but they're not quite sure on can I make that, if I get there, what kind of shots do I have, and it's just gonna start off real slow until they get to know.
It's gonna highlight the individual aggressiveness though.
Yeah,
I can see both ways.
I agree. I think that's gonna highlight. You're gonna see guys that go out there and they have the tenacity and the aggressiveness and the skill, they're going to make a move where, like, the first time, maybe it's like first thing like Friday morning or something like that, somebody's going to go out there and make a really bold, aggressive move, and everybody in the crowd is going to sit there and be like, oh my god, what's happening? That guy out there making that move is probably doing the same thing. He's like, I hope this works, and he goes and he bunkers somebody, and I think that is going to be the exciting thing to see.
And I think PSP, I think that's what their plan is. I'm just hoping it works.
I think, you're going to see the daring and the bold be rewarded. And it could not be. Maybe 50% of the time that dude goes up and he's like, I'm going to go up and I'm going to run through, I'm going to bunker these 2 bunkers, and then I'm going to shoot this way. In his head, because that's what he thinks is going to happen. He maybe has a clue of the layout. But then he goes out, he bunkers 2 empty bunkers, and then he shoots the completely wrong way, and then he gets blasted. Either way, I think it's going to be exciting. And to bring up a super corny, just way to kind of look at it, I think it's going to be, survival of the fittest. The guys with the most true skill and the guys who are the best at paintball are going to adapt to the circumstances. They're going to adapt to being able to read a field. It's almost like, I don't know, guys playing golf. You get it on the green. You finally get it on the green, and you got him over there, and he's like leaning down, and he's looking at like the slope, and he's looking at how the grass is cut and all that stuff. He's trying to read the green so he can putt the ball in the right direction and it flows. And
but doesn't he ask his caddy for help?
That's beyond.
Isn't that a sideline coach?
Well, both of them are. The point is, both of them are clueless, sitting there staring at grass, figuring out how ball is going to roll across grass. These guys are going to be out there doing the same freaking thing in the middle of a game.
Yeah.
I think that's going to be super exciting to watch, and the players that are best at it and learn how to adapt to it quickly, and learn how to adapt to it correctly. I think you're just going to see an escalation of skill level, and I can't picture that in my head not being exciting.
Well, I mean, Al's point was that, or Alex Escart's point was that, we don't know if it's going to be detrimental to the game, to the pace of the game that we've seen. It's been super exciting. It's been super exciting in the last couple of years watching the pace of that game go. Bing, bang, boom. It's been very quick. It's been very fun to watch. In general. Yeah, guys getting shot out left and right. Yeah, and that happens. But I mean, the PSP obviously had the pendulum on one big end, and now it's swinging really far to the other end.
Yeah, and
there's going to be there's a question of whether or not there's going to be a space in that middle to find.
Right.
Do we allow sideline coaching but keep it at 10-2 semi?
Right, yeah.
They've definitely swung that pendulum again back to individual skill, but at the detriment of the spectator portion of it. That's really the question, and I think that's what they're trying to answer now.
Right, yeah. I think, honestly, with all these rule changes, I think what they're really shooting at, and, we're all looking at it as players going, man, I think we're going to see some awesome skill players become better players and all that thing. I think the way they're probably looking at it, the skill, what we're talking about, is going to be a side effect. They're looking at it to be a better spectator thing. Going back to your point about the field layouts, I absolutely see your side of the argument, where if both teams really know that layout so well that it's so even, just like a football field where it's big, square, open, there's no obstacles and everything, everybody knows it just the same as a big, square, open circle. It really depends on the individual person who's better to be able to win, in whatever specific engagement. I absolutely see that point. I think both sides, to me, make sense. You could really swing it either way, and it makes sense to me. I think you're going to see more skill progression on when they don't know the field than if they do. I certainly think there's skill either way, because if you're going into 2 evenly matched, completely everything's the same, ramping, both people know the bunker layout and the field layout, it definitely comes down to individual skill, no question. I think we can all agree on that.
Yeah.
I think them not knowing the field comes down to more individual skill.
And removing sideline coaching.
Yeah, and removing sideline coaching and the semi-auto all in conjunction.
This is a team sport. You guys keep on talking about individual skill. I want the skill of the team.
Yeah, but there's still individual skill when you're talking about communication and having to know not having to know how to communicate and what to communicate. That's all. It's still an individual skill, but bundled up as a team.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, and I certainly apologize to anybody listening if I almost feel now that you mention it like that, I apologize if we haven't been coming across as understanding that obviously this is a team sport. Um, we do keep mentioning individual skill level, and I think it absolutely is individual, person skills, but that all congeals and you put that all together. Every person's individual skills need to go into creating like a team skill level.
And
You
it's so
can
hard to build.
your team is only as good as your weakest link. Honestly, it's a totally cliched way to go about it. But if you've got a 5-man team and you got 4 superstars and you got one guy who's horrendous at communicating and he can't communicate for anything, it doesn't matter where you put him on that field. There's at some point he's going to need to be able to communicate something serious to help you win that game. But he's not going to be able to do it. Doesn't matter how good your 4 superstars are. Maybe they'll be able to hold their own in one-on-ones and in whatever, but that's going to be a serious detriment to the team. Your individual skill levels all congeal to create one team skill level. Working together to create skill as a team, I think, does need to be almost a separate build. Like, you need to work on that separately than your individual skill levels. But having you need to have and be a skilled individual first before you go into trying to create a skilled team.
Yeah, because the whole thing with building teams is, I think I was talking to Ryan, Joe's teammate, and some of the issues that a lot of teams have are you can have 5 awesome players, but if they're not playing as a team, then they're not gonna win. I remember Ryan telling me about that. I was like, at one of the combines or something like that. It doesn't matter if you had the 5 best players in paintball. Like, look at our Chaos, the first event.
Yeah,
or second event.
We're totally excluding the Miami Heat from the past couple years from this conversation as well. Continue.
So you can have all the best players, but if there's no
cohesion.
Cohesion between everybody.
Yeah, exactly. If they don't play together well, if they don't communicate together well, they can be the best players on earth, but they're all going to get shot out because nobody's watching each other's backs and nobody's holding each other's lanes and nobody's telling anybody that's.
And that's why when they keep playing the same layouts, I think it helps build the team versus.
No, I absolutely agree. Using that same piece of information, I think that's where you're going to see teams that have gone out of their way to either one, just obviously you're going to see teams that have really tried and true work together to become that deeper team where it doesn't matter of the layout. They are so close as a team where they can communicate and adapt. That's where you're going to see people going above and beyond. You're going to see people getting escalating into a higher echelon of being a team. Whereas maybe the all-star Merc team, if they're all superstars and they all want to be number one, maybe it doesn't work out so well because they all have conflicting interests.
Yeah.
Where if you have 5 average players, they might do better than a team with 3 super all-stars and 2 average players.
Right. If everybody's wants to be an all-star, it's not going to work.
Right.
I know, like, my old teammate Ryan, he always played Snake. And now, with his new team, he plays a back. And I remember I just talking to him, he's like, it's so weird. I just go to a back corner and I just keep shooting paint.
Right.
I want to be up front, but my job is to shoot paint.
Right. And
then when it's time for him to move, then he moves kind of thing. But it's just...
If you have the individual, if he had, the motivation, the individual skill for, I'm not gonna, trash this and not play well because I'm pissed off because I'm not playing front and I'm playing in the back and this is garbage and blah 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 blah. Obviously the team would have suffered.
Yeah.
But if he sat down and just had that mentality, be like, you know what, I'm not playing front. I'd rather play front They stuck me in the back. I actually had this happen to me this year. I'm 5'3", 120 pounds, and I ended up playing snake corner and home for 2 straight events, like with a 6'3" guy playing my snake front. Like, that was really weird. Yeah. I'm used to playing up front, and to me that didn't make sense. I'm not leading the team. Granted, we all had a say in it. The vast majority of the team agreed that this is the way we wanted to do it, so we did it. I'm not going to be that guy where, like, oh, I don't like this. This is stupid. I'm not playing snake front. I don't like the way this is going, so I'm not going to try. No, that's dumb. I still want to win.
Yeah.
So I'm going to go out there as being 5'3", 120 pounds, really small guy, playing the back can, where I could probably fit 2 of me in the back can, and we'd be all set. And I played the back, I played back corner as well as I possibly could. And we did well because of it. Yeah. Obviously not just my individual effort, but
probably 95% of it though, right?
Yeah, granted, 95 roughly 95 to 98% of that was because of my skill set. But you can't go out there with the individual attitude. Your individual skills need to be honed and as good as you can make them. Yes, and you should absolutely be always working on your individual skill set. Your mentality, however, needs to be towards the team.
Right.
Which I don't know if we've stressed really toward throughout this roundtable, but that's certainly the way I feel throughout that. I think all 3 of these rule changes are going to stress players needing to hone their individual skills.
Being able to read a field, being able to adapt to that field quickly.
Yeah.
And then, individual, nobody else is pulling the trigger at you.
Correct. Yeah. Individual skills are going to need to be honed, and you're going to need to be able to work really, really hard at that, and you're going to have to do a good job. But at the end of the day, you as a person, as a player, need to be that good and decent of a player, and, you need to have that mentality towards the team so you can all put your individual skills together and collaboratively make a cohesive unit as a team.
Yeah. And one thing I was just thinking of now with the whole, the release of the layout.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of tired teams Friday morning. Because, every local field there, at 11:01, they're going to find out what the layout is. They're going to set up their field, and then every pro team's going to get as much play as they can. They're going to be getting at the field at noon. They're going to play till 8 o'clock at night. They're still going to shoot their skids of paint, and then sleep for 4 hours, wake up, and then go play an event.
Yeah. I absolutely agree. So I think we can all kind of consense that there's going to be a lot more skill involved, and we're going to see a lot of differences coming up in this 2015 PSP season, which I think we're all excited to see.
Oh, absolutely.
So
very much.
Doesn't matter what the changes are. I'm still super excited to watch it.
Yeah, absolutely. So on that note, after this hour and a half, I think, point, we're going to go ahead and wrap up. I hope you enjoyed the video. If you're still listening at this point, I really do appreciate it. If you enjoyed the video by any means, I would really appreciate it if you hit that like button. It really helps out the channel a lot, and I certainly appreciate it. Alex, Joe, thank you for joining me on this Paintball Roundtable.
Yeah, no problem.
Absolutely.
And I hope we'll probably have these guys back again for you guys to listen to ever so intently. And I hope you enjoyed the video, guys, and we will see you guys next time.